Hello, and welcome to the Things I Want My Daughters to Know podcast, the podcast redefining women's health, one unfiltered conversation at a time. I'm your host, Jacqueline Rose, and every week I'll sit down with leading women's health experts and real women to share their lived experiences, bust health myths, challenge outdated and uninformed narratives, and explore what's really possible for women. We'll talk about periods, fertility, menopause, hormones, aging, and everything in between. This podcast is for every woman who ever felt confused, dismissed, or left out of the conversation about her own health. It is a space to celebrate women, break the silence, and open up conversations between mothers, daughters, sisters, and friends. Please hit the follow or subscribe button so you don't miss an episode and share this podcast with your daughters, family, and friends. Let's get on with the episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Things I Want My Daughters to Know podcast. I am very excited for this conversation. I know I say that with every conversation, but today we're actually going to get into some really interesting topics around my favorite things: menopause, women's health, nervous system regulation, understanding our bodies, listening and tuning in to our innate feminine wisdom. These are all things that I feel really passionate about. And I'm so excited, Mandy, that you are joining me today for this conversation. Welcome. Tell us who you are, what you do, and we'll jump straight in.
Yes, so I'm Dr. Mandy Marziaz. I am a chiropractor by license, and I've always worked with high achieving women, even as a chiropractor. And I pivoted a few years ago to working completely online. So now I work virtually, doing kind of a blend of functional medicine, health coaching, transformational life coaching. It's kind of everything, right? Because we don't live or exist in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And my whole life, I've really been studying. I'm an endurance athlete. I've really been studying stress physiology and what that does to the body. So it's kind of come from a fascination in my 20s of like, how do we make our bodies do these feats like endurance athletics
Right.
to how do we survive midlife
Right.
and not burn
Right.
out?
Right. Amazing. And I love that phrase. And maybe we can start there with that phrase of high achieving women, because I think that so many women really are putting themselves out there. We want to have it all. We often can have it all, although I say not always at the same time. But, women who are really advancing their career, investing in their career, maybe, starting a family also at the same time. But these high achieving women who really have high expectations on themselves, they're putting themselves in high powered positions. They are in leadership roles, often in C suites, in corporate, or they are entrepreneurs, creating their own businesses. And what do you see happening? What do you sort of see the trajectory of these amazing women as they navigate into perimenopause and sort of that whole notion of stress? Well, I don't want to put words into your mouth. Let's sort of start with that sort of understanding about this sort of category of women. And I don't want to, God forbid, say anything bad about women who are not categorized as high achieving women. I think all women are high achieving women, but we're talking about a specific demographic of women who really are pushing themselves to sort of achieve professionally in ways that maybe other women aren't.
Yes. So what I see is when we hit perimenopause, which we're now seeing starting as early as mid to late 30s. Like I get a lot of women coming to me at like 36 years old. Why can't I sleep? Why is all this stuff going on? So I find we're cruising along in life. And maybe if we can look back, we can say, yeah, I wasn't sleeping enough in my 20s and 30s, and I was eating junk food and I was, burning the candle at all ends. But, we were
Yeah.
doing life and we were somehow able to keep our heads above water. And then we
Yeah.
hit this kind of hormonal decline at the start of perimenopause, which the first hormones that decline are our calming sleep hormones. So
Yeah.
that is not
Progesterone.
helpful to our high achieving, nature. And so we kind of hit this hormonal decline and the mask falls off. And then we start feeling
Yeah.
like we just can't do it anymore. And then it's like, what happened to my resilience? Like, yes, I know I used to push a little bit hard, but I can't push hard. I hit that wall much quicker. And now I'm
Yeah.
not sleeping, and that compounds. And, you
Yeah.
know, I look at carbs and I gain weight and have gut
Yeah.
disruption. And, I can't exercise like I used to, like
Yeah.
all these things. So it just kind of,
The sentence that I hear a lot, which I think probably resonates very much with this demographic, is I'm not as sharp as I used to be. I can't juggle things in the same way.
yes, yes. Yeah, we just kind of hit this wall where we can't do that high
Yeah.
level that we used to. And women are very confused and very lost. And then it kind of hits this identity question. Like, if I can't be
Yeah.
this high achieving, high powered woman, who am I?
Yes.
And, you know, a
Yeah.
lot of
And
us kind
especially
of
when
get,
you've invested a lot of years in developing that persona,
Mhm.
and maybe you've made family decisions or you've done things that really have all been focusing on that high achieving persona to really get to that highest professional level.
Yes. And like, this is the story I hear over and over, and it's my story. Like, we hit this wall, and most of us sit there and say, I didn't hate who I was. It wasn't like I disliked being this high achieving woman with
Mm,
all we loved that, right? We that fueled us. So now we
yeah.
can't be who we really want to be, and it's very disheartening and confusing. And then we usually start the cycle of, okay, I need to go to the doctor, and they don't have any
Yep.
answers for you. And then some people have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, right, seeing alternative practitioners and
Yep.
trying every biohack out there, supplement stacks, medicine, whatever, while our body just continues to fall apart. And then
Yep.
no one is providing these answers to us.
Yep. So then we get sort of hit with words like overwhelm, burnout, chronic stress, and these sort of words that are all very nice, but what does it actually mean, and what is really going on? Sort of what is going on, emotionally, physically, biologically, what's really happening in the woman's body as we're getting sort of, as you say, hitting this wall, which, is often known as that sort of absolute fatigue, nervous system dysregulation, sort of all these things that are sort of these terms that are now thrown out to this woman that's now experiencing, you know, really not being able to show up in the way that she used to be able to.
Right. And what's happening is, like I said, when you're younger, 20s and 30s, we're, things are being masked. We're living off adrenaline, and
Yeah.
everybody has had an adrenaline high. Like, we know how that fuels us.
Yeah.
Well, in perimenopause, I mentioned like hormones start to fall off. So you got your main sex hormones for women are estrogen and progesterone. We have more than that, but progesterone falls off first, and she's kind of our calming hormone. So then we
Yeah.
lose that. She's also the hormone that helps us sleep. So many women I work with, and myself included, hit this wall right around 40 where suddenly I can't sleep anymore. And
Yeah.
if you're not sleeping,
Yeah.
nothing works,
Nothing
and this
works.
isn't fixed by more coffee the next day. So you've got that, and then estrogen's doing this thing, up down, up down,
Yeah.
up down, right?
Yeah.
Estrogen is all, it's a roller coaster in perimenopause. So some days you feel high estrogen, sometimes it's very low, and so that makes it really hard to regulate. So you lose this ability to regulate your nervous system, to regulate your stress. Estrogen
Yeah.
buffers cortisol, which is our main stress hormone. So now we lose that buffer. So that's why we
Yeah.
hit this point in midlife where we're like, I'm living my life the same way I've been living it, and all of a sudden I
Yeah.
can't do it. There's really a physiology going on there.
Yeah.
And once the masks fall off, you're realizing, well, it takes a while to get to this realization, but we realize what we were doing was never sustainable in the first place.
Yeah.
It was part of a culture that rewards the hustle and the push. And, we sing the praises of women that are killing themselves to make it in this world.
Yeah.
And while we love the achievements and we love all that comes with that, it's not truly sustainable for us for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. So I've said it previously on previous episodes that in my 30s I lived according to the mantra, if you need something done, ask a busy person, and I was that busy person. So yeah, that sort of fell away very quickly in my 40s. But I want you to go back to something that I think is really profound that not enough people are talking about, and that is the estrogen cortisol relationship. And the fact that, sort of, as you've said, during our 20s and our 30s, it all seems more manageable. It's sort of a bit of a facade, but there is some reality of, yeah, like we can do all the things. We feel like in those, that period of time, we can do all the things. We can raise a family. We can, develop our career. So part of the story is this estrogen cortisol relationship, and that when estrogen and progesterone starts to fluctuate, as you said, so we lose that cortisol protection piece. So then all of a sudden, whatever nervous system regulation we had now goes out the window. So can you sort of talk about that a little bit more to explain that to us a little bit more?
Yes. So as I said, cortisol or estrogen is buffering your cortisol. So cortisol is your main stress hormone. It's necessary for survival, and your body really doesn't know that you're not out in the jungle running from lions and tigers, that you're just sitting at your desk dealing with everyday stress.
Yeah.
So we're pumping out the same hormones. And estrogen just kind of provides a buffer to cortisol so it doesn't swing too high, swing too low. And what I find a lot in midlife is that we've been running at this high level of cortisol for so long,
Yeah.
they've termed it, adrenal burnout, adrenal exhaustion. It's
Adrenal
not true adrenal
fatigue.
burnout. Your adrenals are not malfunctioning. They're just not optimally releasing cortisol. It's almost like you've run high for so long that now your body goes into this kind of conserved state, if you will,
Yeah.
where, if you ran, sometimes with clients, I run, they call it a 4-point salivary cortisol test, where you test your
Yeah.
saliva 4 times throughout the day to see what your cortisol curve looks like, which should go up in the morning and gradually fall
Yeah.
throughout the day. Well, by the time we've been too high all day long, it's just flat. Like that was my story in my late 30s. Completely flatlined. I had no rise, no fall, and
Yeah. I
chronic
think that's a really
fatigue,
important
everything.
point to note, because we always talk about high cortisol, your cortisol, like your body's pumping cortisol the whole time, high cortisol. We don't actually say that at a certain point in time, cortisol then flatlines. And it's not that you've got too much cortisol, it's that you have no cortisol at all. And that's also a big problem, because as you said, there is a natural cortisol release during the day. And too high constantly and then flatline too low constantly, neither of them are very good.
Right, right. And then we have the hormones that are the precursors for cortisol and estrogen, which is DHEA, that will get pulled to make more cortisol. I mean, you don't need estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone to live. To live optimally, you might, but you
Yeah.
don't need that to survive. So your body will make cortisol because you need that to survive. Well,
Yeah.
then that's been pumping out of your adrenals for so long that that stops being as efficient and it's not pumping out as much. And if we don't have the building blocks to those other hormones, that's another kind of myth, is that everyone thinks you just stop producing hormones in menopause. You don't stop. You just go to a lower level. So
Thank you so
testosterone,
much for saying
estrogen, and
that. I
progesterone,
want
yeah.
I want you to repeat it. I want everyone to listen, because this is another big myth that is out there, that when you get into postmenopause, your reproductive hormones sort of bottom out and you've got none of them and they don't function. Please repeat what you just said, Dr. Mandy, because I think it's such a critical piece of the story.
Yes, so your body does not totally stop producing hormones. They just go to a lower level. And here's the thing, your adrenal glands produce those hormones. So if your
Yeah.
adrenal glands are already fried, right, so to speak, from all the years of, living at this level, then
Yeah.
they aren't going to be as efficient at making the little bit of sex hormones that you still need to get through the rest of your life.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you for really sort of honing in that point. It's really, really important. So let's talk about this phrase, chronic stress and nervous system dysregulation, and the way that sort of our body is interpreting and sort of expresses through symptoms what happens. We understand sort of maybe why we've been able to maintain this illusion during our 20s and our 30s, but coming into our 40s and well into menopause, with the fluctuation of progesterone, estrogen, and this long-term chronic stress experience, we now have dysregulation, whether you call it sort of chronic stress, nervous system dysregulation, just dysregulation and imbalance in our bodies. what's going on and what sort of, yeah, let's start off with what's going on.
Yes. So, yeah, chronic stress and nervous system dysregulation are big buzzwords that are thrown around
Yeah.
out there. And, chronic stress is living in a high stress state most of the time. And most of us don't identify with being there because our modern culture normalizes that. So,
Yes.
here's the thing about stress. You're meant to have stress in your life. Like exercise is my favorite example of a good stress on the body, but
Right.
you're supposed to have the stressor and then come down from it. And most of us just stay in high stress all day, right? It's not just the
Yeah.
exercise we're doing, it's our work stress, our family stress, social media, politics, right? All the things.
Yeah.
So we're not meant to stay in this level of high stress all the time. And that causes other problems in our bodies because when cortisol stays high, it dysregulates your blood sugar, it messes with your blood pressure, it messes with your heart health and all these other things. Your hair, a lot of women get hair loss, really, especially in midlife related to stress. So we've got that chronic stress, and staying in this high state of stress leads to a dysregulated nervous system. You have two arms
Yeah.
of your nervous system, sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic is your stress. It goes into sympathetic mode when you're responding to a stressor. Parasympathetic is your chill. You can't really dial down the sympathetic, but you can bring up the parasympathetic by doing a lot of things you might have heard of, like vagus nerve work and things like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we need to spend more time in parasympathetic. And now that we're all wearing trackers, like I wear an Aura ring, we're seeing this. Like we aren't supposed to
Yeah.
spend 6, 7 hours a day in high stress and like zero time in restored.
Yeah.
But it's
I think
become so
what we're missing,
normal.
exactly. I think what we're missing, because when we talk about nervous system dysregulation, there obviously is a nervous system regulation state. And I think what you're expressing is that we need to be fluctuating between these states. We need to be on this
Mhm.
pendulums going from, you know, high fight or flight, nervous system, stimulation to this parasympathetic stimulation and everything in between. Anyone, as you've mentioned, anyone familiar with polyvagal theory or vagus nerve activation, we want to be swinging along these states. And that's not where we live. And even if you are doing some of those parasympathetic nervous system sort of calming, rest and digest state things, it's normally for, whilst you are, let's say, journaling for your 20 minutes in the morning, and then you'll spend the rest of the 23 hours in high stress mode. So it's great that you were journaling and you were calm and you were relaxed, you were meditating for 20 minutes or half an hour in the morning. But if you then spend the rest of the day in this super stressed out state, that's not nervous system regulation.
And it's also like what is your lived experience? So like this is the work I do with clients. Like
Yeah.
what is your history? If you've someone who's spent most of your life in a dysregulated nervous system in a high stress state and you
Yeah.
try to meditate, or maybe you've tried to do breath work and it doesn't work, it actually makes you feel worse. That's because your nervous system hasn't even learned that it's safe to downshift, that it's
Yeah.
safe to rest. This was my story. I got long COVID. I had no choice
Wow.
but to rest. And I was still my data all day. I'm on the couch doing nothing, and my data all day is high stress because I my nervous system wasn't taught this is safe. That I still got to be
Yeah.
on high alert. I still got to be scanning
Yeah.
for dangers. That's a whole nother podcast episode.
Yes. Yeah. 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 So I guess from your, you've been sort of hinting at your own personal lived experience of this type of situation. But let's talk about sort of what we do, because for many women, the reality is that this is just life. As you said, this is normal. This is what we've normalized our lives to sort of function as. And how this whole state now interacts with this perimenopause, menopause time of our lives, and sort of what we really can do about it. Practically, what in reality, what are the tips and the tricks and the recommendations? How do you work with your clients? How did you really pay attention and begin to start healing yourself?
Yes, because as I've mentioned, on top of the perimenopause journey, I ended up with long COVID. So I had a
Right.
reality check on all of this.
Wow.
And I spent thousands of dollars, put it on credit cards to try to, kind of hack my way through it. And, even the supplement stack started backfiring. So I
Yeah.
really had to learn, and this is the work I do with my clients, to slow down, to
Yeah.
tune in and do less. And it's really like the answers, the wisdom is in our bodies, but we never slow down enough or we haven't been in our bodies. We're like up here all the time.
Yeah.
So it's really a lot of slowing down. And I can tell you what moved the needle the most for me was not, oh, I need to be doing 15 minutes of breath work and I need to be meditating. And that stuff is all helpful, don't get me wrong. But I
Yeah.
had to start with just doing less and being okay with doing less. And so sometimes with
Yeah.
clients, I start with like, what can we offload off our plates? Because there's so
Yeah.
much stuff we're doing that we probably don't need to do or need to do it to the level that we're doing it at. Where can we just simplify?
Yeah. So what you're saying is really profound. And I know there are going to be women screaming down their earphones or screaming down the screen at you and saying, but that's just not realistic for me. Like that's never going to work. So I agree with you, but let's maybe break it down. So the first thing is, as you've said, women are, and because the whole meno business has exploded and the whole conversation around perimenopause and menopause has exploded, so have all the hacks and all the biohacks and all the medication and the supplements. And um you sort of we mentioned that you really use a very interesting line of, you can't supplement or biohack your way out of a dysregulated nervous system. And I really love that phrase because I think women really feel that they can carry on living their lives. Let's just stick an HRT patch on me. Let's buy all the supplements that I can, get. Let's, as you said, yes, let's do the journaling and the meditation and the breath work. And then and then that will sort of save me or heal me or make me, feel more in balance. And I can just go on living my crazy, busy, hectic, stressed out life. But it's fine because I'm doing all the things. So unpack that a little bit for me.
Yes, yes. And I want to say, like, I work with those women too. They get so mad. They're like, but I can't let anything go. And,
Yeah.
that's another
Yeah.
conversation. You can get into deeper layers of that. But yeah, some things that you can start with is I like to say control the controllables. So what do you have within your reach? Like,
Yeah.
can you work on your morning routine? Can you work on your evening routine? And even if it's small, like for me, I try to start getting more sunlight because now that I work from home, right, I can easily just never
Yeah.
leave the house. And
Yeah.
I am not a woman that does well slowing down. So if you tell me to sit outside for 15 minutes in the morning, absolutely not going to happen. I started with 1 minute. Can I just, and
Yeah.
maybe I was picking up something, stuff in my backyard, or, watering the
Yeah.
garden. And set my timer for a minute and hey, I got my sunlight for a minute. So what can you start with? Can you just push your morning coffee off until after you've had a nourishing breakfast? Can you start your day with hydration and sunlight instead of screens? Can
Yeah.
you, get off the screens a little bit, even if it's 30 minutes before bed, a couple hours is more ideal, but a lot of things we're doing we don't need to be doing. Like I don't need to look at Facebook before I go to sleep at night. I know
Yeah.
because I've get the women that tell me I gotta work until 10 or 11 at night. Like what do we have within our control? Can we eat nourishing meals throughout the day, and have a protein forward breakfast and make sure we're getting enough protein? Can we move our bodies in some way that is joyful? And if you're exhausted, like maybe you don't have the energy to go for a 30-minute walk. Can you just
Yeah.
walk around your backyard for 10 minutes? Walk around your neighborhood for 5 minutes. These little, I call them little micro moments
Yes. Yes.
where we
Yes. Yes.
start to
Yes.
teach our nervous system, yes, you can downshift so that it will naturally do that more often for us.
Yeah. I think one of the most important things is we think that if we sort of, tick off on the checklist of the nervous system regulation activity that we have to do at the beginning of the day, then that sort of sets us up for the whole day. We don't realize, as you've mentioned, we can actually do small little things throughout the day. So one of like the best examples I use with my clients is, when it comes to movement is, okay, fine. So they'll say, well, yeah, I go to the gym for an hour 3 or 4 times a week or every day. I'm like, that's great. But what are you doing for the other 10, 11 hours? So you'll go to the gym for an hour, wonderful. But if you're sitting at your desk, or at your workstation for 10 hours, going to the gym for 1 hour actually hasn't really helped you in the long term, in the 24-hour cycle of things. Much better to split up that 1 hour to intervals. So you get up and you move around throughout the day with 5 or 10 minutes of movement and activity, and things that you can do to actually move your body throughout the day is going to be much more impactful than that long hour on the gym. And I think that what you're saying is very similar to that. It doesn't need to be this big, grand commitment or this big sort of undertaking. If you do small things regularly throughout the day, you find something that works for you, that makes sense for you, that's going to be much more impactful than any of these, big things.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I call them micro moments. Like it
Yeah,
doesn't need to be a lot, but we're not designed to sit at our desk for 10, 12 hours without moving. And
right.
take 5 minutes, get a glass of water, stare at the sun outside, just a few minutes. I've noticed
Yeah,
this myself, like especially when I was dealing with the fatigue and afternoons were really hard for me. But if I
yeah,
did some myofascial work, like just some general mobility, simple cat cow, easy things,
yeah,
I felt better and it gave me energy. So you might want
yes,
to try these things, just commit to it. Say, I'm going to do this for the next week and see how I
yeah,
feel.
yeah. So when you do work with your clients, these, as we've, called them, these high achieving women, where slowing down or offloading certain things is so foreign to them, how do they respond? What are they sort of, and you start using words like, listen to your body, tune in, listen to the wisdom of what your body is telling you. I mean, what's the response? How do they interact with these concepts that are probably very foreign to them?
Yeah, so like any other healing journey, it's not linear. It's a lot of back and forth, like it's frustrating,
Yeah,
a lot of people very gung-ho in the beginning and then life happens and then,
yeah,
we hit that wall, we pull back, but as time goes on, you just kind of see this wisdom unfold where we
yeah,
start to learn things about our bodies and ourselves. And we're not always going to make the best choices. I mean, I do this work for a living and I still have weeks where I get to the end of the week and I'm
right.
like, you overdid it. You had a lot of energy on Monday. You didn't take your breaks. But
Yes,
as we start to learn the wisdom of our bodies and embody that and have self-compassion. Like every week isn't going to look perfect, and that's okay. But
yeah,
what am I doing today to nourish myself? I try to pick like, what's three things I can do today to nourish myself, even if one of them is as
yeah,
simple as hydration. That's huge.
yeah, yeah. So, what do you think women really don't understand about symptoms and about the way that sort of their symptoms are showing up? What are some of the things that you're sort of seeing with your clients that are just, these either misunderstood or the myths that they've heard around this whole symptom experience?
Yeah, so my favorite one is hot flashes. I hear over and over again, I don't have any menopause symptoms because I don't have hot flashes. And
Oh, I
congratulations
love that
if you don't
one.
have hot flashes. But there are over 100 documented symptoms of menopause, and I learn a new one every day. I learned one on
Yeah.
myself this morning, hair growing in places it's never grown before. I'm like, what is this? Like,
Yes.
so, we can have ringing in the ears. I mean, obviously the big ones,
Yeah.
sleep issues, weight changes. But yeah, I think women don't realize that this is a total body experience and a total brain experience.
Yeah.
So, one of my favorites is women say, I get to this point in midlife and I just don't care anymore. And I'm like, your brain is actually changing. And that's
Yeah.
biology because when we're younger and we're raising kids, we're meant to tune into our children and tune into that
Right.
more than ourselves, right? So we can raise them. Well, when they move out and we're empty nesters, right? Like now we have ourselves and we really don't care as
Right.
much.
Yeah. Yeah. I think these are such important things that are not being told. And I agree with you. I also hear so much, you know, I don't have brain fog. I don't have hot flashes. I'm not in perimenopause. Or even doctors that will say, well, if you don't have, hot flashes, it's not perimenopause. So yeah, I think the expectation of symptoms and the misunderstanding of how symptoms show up. And so, as part of your sort of protocol or the way that you're working with your clients, what are you sort of focusing in on and really putting a lot of emphasis on in sort of navigating this stage of life in a really optimal, balanced, healthy way so that if you have experienced, fatigue, overwhelm, burnout, these sort of, tag words, what are you looking to create now? What sort of what type of things are you sharing? What type of things are you looking for? What type of things are you hoping that your clients are now going to adopt and take on? Is it just the slowing down or is there more to it?
Yeah, there's so much more to it. Slowing down is just kind of how we tune in and start to learn from our bodies, right?
Right.
And yeah, so we're looking at like I like to look at health as a pyramid and like hormones are really at the top and it's affected by everything underneath. So we're looking at all the
Yeah.
foundations, nervous system being one of them, your stress, but also sleep, how you're nourishing yourself, movement, mindset. Like I love to study like the blue zones and they have what
Yes.
7 pillars of longevity and only one of them has to do with food. We all think it's about food, but it's not. It's about everything
Yeah.
else. Like what's your social connection? What's your sense of purpose in life? I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
women struggle with this, especially women that have spent their lives raising kids and then the kids move out
Yeah.
and then I hit menopause and who am I? So
Yes.
it's exploring all these deeper things. And right now, I've got some group programs in my brain, but right now I'm working exclusively one-on-one with clients. And so this allows us to take a deeper dive into all of these things and like, what do you want your life to look like in the second half? Because this
Yes.
really truly can be midlife and we're living longer and longer, right? So what do you want the second half of
Yeah.
your life to look and feel like and experience? And then
Yeah.
let's reverse engineer that.
I think that really is one of the most critical questions. It's a question that I also sort of talk about a lot. And I don't think it's a question that is being discussed enough and I think also the answer is not always so easy to come by, because as we've said, you've identified as this particular identity with these hats or these titles, and now things have changed. And even as a high achieving woman, you may not want to achieve your professional satisfaction in the same ways anymore. You may want to do it slightly differently. You may want to, leave your corporate job and set up your own little business. Like it will look very different. And I think that question of how do you want that next stage of your life to look like is a question that really isn't being asked. And a lot of women sort of face it out of very often being pulled into this sort of stage, and they're forced to ask these questions and forced to pay attention to these things that are coming up without doing it from a place of willingness and choice and empowerment. It's sort of like they're thrown into this and they're like, oh my gosh, okay, now I've got to make some really big decisions and ask myself some really important questions.
Right. And nobody's holding the conversation for that. I mean, we're
Yep.
out there in the media, we're treating menopause as a problem to be solved.
Yes.
And yes, there are women suffering from very debilitating symptoms, and I empathize with that and I help women through that. But there's also this deeper thing underneath, and we're not having a deeper conversation. Like, what does this really look like? What do you want your life to be like? What are your goals?
Yeah.
Many women are like, I want to be climbing mountains in my 80s, or I want to be able to get on the floor with my grandkids. Like,
Yep.
these are very simple things that we can work with.
Yeah. And no one's having that conversation. So yeah, I love it. I'm having the conversation, you're having the conversation, so at least two of us are. But yeah, it's so I want to ask you a question that I know is going to take us in a slightly different tangent, but I think it's a really, really important conversation to have. And that is that we know that how you experience perimenopause is not just a function of what happens, the day before you arrive in perimenopause. It's a function of everything that's gone on in your life in the years leading up to it. And we talked about women in their 20s and 30s and sort of how they're able to function. But I guess I want to get sort of go even further back and really start talking about what's going on with our teens, what's going on with women in their, early mid 20s. What are they experiencing when, the things that we are now seeing with this younger generation of women that are sort of experiencing things and still today, despite the growth in menopause conversations and despite the awareness that, our medical healthcare system doesn't really understand women's health well, these sort of teens and 20s are going through certain things, what are you that will then impact profoundly what happens in perimenopause. So what are you seeing, what are you seeing and hearing from your clients, sort of what shed some light on what's going on with all of that.
Yeah, so I also end up working with a lot of women in their 20s and early 30s because I work with the moms and then they send their daughters to me.
Right.
And I'm seeing so much hormonal dysregulation so much younger. And we've seen this. We've seen it right down to like kids, girls going into puberty earlier. And
Yeah.
some of that is environmental. We have more toxins, more estrogen disruptors in our environment.
Yeah.
We're also living a life that's highly stressful. Like I wasn't a child in 2020. Just living through that. Imagine the stress that these kids went
Yeah.
through, the load they're carrying, the
Yeah.
homeschooling, all these things. And we're just seeing it show up in the hormones. And then doctors are putting women on birth control to deal with these hormonal imbalances. You go to your OBGYN,
Yep.
unfortunately, they're not really trained in how to regulate your hormones. Like I've talked to OBGYNs. They're trained on how to deliver babies. Like,
Yeah.
get the baby into the
They're
world, how to,
and
right?
I think this is a really important point, and I definitely want to talk about sort of the next piece of the story, but let's just really let our audience understand what OBGYNs are trained in. They are in England, it's called, gynecologists, but they are trained in, understanding birth. They do understand the reproductive system, but as it relates to fertility and birth. And then a lot of surgical interventions that arise as a result of either problematic births or, aging, reproductive issues like prolapse and things like that. That's sort of where their sort of area of expertise in, and medical procedures that are to do with the reproductive system. But what are they not trained in?
They are not trained in menopause for sure. And they're not really trained in how to like optimize your hormones to just
Right.
have a good life, right? Like you said, they're trained in fertility and how to get pregnant and carry the pregnancy. They kind of fall short a lot in postpartum. We're seeing more and more postpartum stuff pop up.
Yeah.
But they put teenagers on birth control to deal with these symptoms of imbalance. And then we're suppressing the ovaries before they've even, so it takes what do they say, 5 to 7 years for your body to find its rhythm with, pumping
Yeah.
out hormones and having your monthly cycle. So if we suppress that right away, we haven't
Yeah.
even had, our bodies haven't even had a chance to experience that. And then we come off birth control to get pregnant. And what happens to most women? They feel horrible. That's a nightmare. They can't get pregnant. They go right back on it. Then we have to go to fertility drugs, which I'm not I'm not
Yeah.
judging anybody that goes this route because sometimes we need to bring in help, but it's widely overused. So then
Yeah.
after we have the baby, we go back on birth control. And then, I mean, I've talked to women that don't even know if they're in menopause because they've been on birth control so long.
So long.
And
Yeah.
and your body hasn't learned how to handle that. And I
Yeah.
work with a lot of women that like come off of birth control after 10, 12 years straight of being on it. And boy, they feel like they've been hit by a couple of trains. Like, because
Yeah.
you were dysregulated when you went on it, and then your body has no idea what to do with these hormones that
Yeah.
has not been used to cycling.
Yeah. And you will hear from women who will say, I went off birth control and within 3 months I was pregnant. And that's amazing. And that's great. And there are plenty of women where they're on the, oral contraceptive pill, some type of hormonal birth control pill, and they're fine. And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. And that's great for you. But even if you are functioning on the, hormonal contraceptive pill, you should still be aware of what it's actually doing to your body. Like, even
Right,
if you
informed consent.
exactly, exactly. And I don't think there is any informed consent when doctors are giving girls at the age of 16 the oral contraceptive pill to deal with their acne, to regulate their cycles. They've got really, really heavy bleeds. Okay, fine, let's just go on the pill and you'll feel great. And again, not saying that the pill is not needed in some situations. And it's not saying that every single woman is going to feel terrible while she's on the pill. but just be aware of what it is you're taking and what the biology is of what it's doing in your body.
Right. And that's like, half the time my coaching sessions are really helping women understand what's going on with their Western doctors because the
Yeah.
5 minutes that I know in this country, they have 5 to 7 minutes to spend with you. You're not getting a whole lot of questions answered, and they're certainly not explaining these things. And what are the, like, I don't think I've ever heard of a medical doctor saying what are the long-term ramifications of being on birth control for a long time. I don't think anybody has that conversation.
Yeah.
And I was offered a pill at 16 because I had very heavy, clotty, painful periods, which I'm sure was undiagnosed endometriosis. And they just said, here's your pill. And I was like a doctor's worst nightmare. I looked to ask why a lot. So I said, why? And the doctor said, just take this and you'll feel better. But I was like, why? And I tried
Yeah.
it and I felt absolutely horrible on it. So I took myself off of it and spent the next 15 years suffering with periods. So
Yeah.
it's a broken system.
Yeah. And then we often will tell women, if you're not getting the answers you need, go find another doctor. But if you're still within the same healthcare system,
Mhm.
unless you find a really amazing unicorn, of which there are some amazing doctors who really have taken it upon themselves to educate themselves. Um, or you have to go private, or you have to go to a functional medicine doctor, or you have to go to, someone like you or myself. I'm not a doctor. I don't pretend to be a doctor. I can't, prescribe, but I educate and guide and support and coach. But sometimes you can be going to see 3, 4, 5 doctors until you find someone that is actually giving you the answers you need. And if you are struggling every month with really heavy bleeds, really uncomfortable periods, or 101 of the other things that young women are going through, who has the time and obviously the money to go and see 3, 4, 5 doctors when one doctor just said, just take it. This is the prescription. This is the medication that's going to make you feel better. Take it.
Yeah, and that's why I say there's no shame in that if you went that route and you tried these things because you're doing the best with the information you've been provided. My message is to get more of this information out there so women can make informed, embodied choices about their healthcare.
Yeah.
You may still choose the same route, but at least you know what you're doing and what else can be done. And again, I don't blame the doctors. I think it is a very broken system. I think there's parts of their education that's lacking, and they're just if you're in an insurance model, like
Yeah.
that's it. You literally have 5 minutes to spend with the patient. You spend any more, and I won't go
Yeah.
down the conspiracy theory path because I've heard from doctors a lot of other things. Like they have to be recommending so many tests a month, or they could lose their job. Like really bad things out there. So we
Right.
really have to be educated and informed. And sometimes I'm just teaching clients this is how you speak to your doctor because there's a very
Right.
specific way you want to speak to your medical doctor to kind of get the message
Get the
through.
message. Yeah. This wasn't a question I was planning on asking you, but as we're talking about it, do you think the system is different in the private system where if you're sort of, seeing a doctor and you've actually got an hour to spend with them and whether you're paying out of pocket or your insurance will cover it, is that actually going to give you what you need? Are you seeing that, sort of in that situation, women are getting the answers?
They're getting much better answers, like 80, 90% better answers. But it's unfortunate that it's become a model that's only for the affluent, right? If you don't have
Yeah.
money, you can't access this model. And I live in Colorado where there is a lot of affluent communities here. And I've seen these, they call them concierge practices.
Yes.
And I mean, they're great. They are spending an hour. Like I know one, she specializes in sexual health and she meets
Right.
with both the woman and the partner and what's going on. And she spends an hour, but they're paying 100% cash for that. And
Wow.
most of us middle people and can't
Yeah.
afford that. So
Yeah.
it's part of the broken system. And I don't know the answers to
Yeah.
that.
Well, I will just say, as we know, and whatever you think of Oprah Winfrey and what she's done, with her documentaries on menopause or not, and is irrelevant. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but she does talk about, and we're talking about, the richest woman in America, probably, who herself she says she had to go to at least 5, 6 doctors before she was diagnosed with her heart palpitations as that being perimenopause. So even someone like her who
Who has
has the money
billions
to
of
spend,
dollars.
yeah, who has the money to spend, it took her a whole bunch of doctors. She had every cardiogram, every heart test, every, EKG, she had all the tests, and she was still having all these heart palpitations until one doctor, a long way down the line, eventually said to her, this could be perimenopause. So
Mhm.
it took her many, many years to understand what was going on. And I only use her as an example because she has access to the best doctors. Money isn't an issue. Time isn't an issue for her. You can't, how can you then think that the regular, woman on the street living in some town is going to get the answers she needs?
Yeah, and that's the problem. That's what I say. It's affluent people, and like you
Yeah,
mentioned, even Oprah is still having to go through five or six doctors to find
yeah,
the answers.
yeah,
Yeah, there has to be a better way out there.
yeah. So, I guess let me ask you, what does it look like when we shift from this sort of concept of fixing ourselves, all the biohacks, doing all the things, listening to all the influencers, listening to all the, big noise that's out there, and actually tuning into your body and sort of making this shift? And I know, as we've said, for some women, it's a really difficult journey. It doesn't happen overnight. But at the end of the day, there is some shift that has to happen. So, what does that look like? What do you see? How does that, how do your clients respond to that once they do embrace it?
It's just like once they embrace it, it's much more calm, much more peaceful. You're making decisions instead of from fear, instead of like, oh, I read this on social media, now I'm freaking out. I put my test
Yeah,
results into Chat GPT, now I'm freaking out. Like
yeah,
you're able to make calm, embodied decisions. And it takes a while to get there because we have to unprogram a lot of that. And, it's taken me years to get here, and I do this work, right? But in my own health, it took me a long time, and I had to stop looking at symptoms as a problem to be solved and like messages. Like what is
yeah,
it's the mind body, right? What is the message
yeah,
my body is giving me? And then, and yes, rule out all the big bad ugly things. Like I've seen the specialists. I know nothing dangerous is happening here. But, what is the messages? And then how can I calmly respond to that? Like sometimes I actually have to just use my, yoga or whatever, my techniques to get into a calm state so
yeah,
that when the symptoms are there, it's like, okay, I'm still safe. Yeah, I might be tired, I might have an anxiety attack right now, but I am still safe.
yeah,
And that
yeah.
takes a lot of work because it's unprogramming the way we've spent our whole lives.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really profound. It's unprogramming how we were taught sort of just intuitively through society to behave. And now we've got to realize that that hasn't been serving us. And, or maybe it served us for a certain time in our lives, but it's not going to serve us moving forward.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. This has been amazing. Everything that you've said, I'm like, yes, 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 yes. It's everything that I believe and everything that I sort of talk about also. Is there anything that we haven't touched upon? Anything that you really want to add? Anything that sort of about maybe some sort of basic principles that, you know, any woman listening, she can start doing now, sort of to start tuning in and listening more, sort of anything that you really want to share as a sort of parting, sort of closing up this piece of the conversation before we move on to the final question I ask all my guests.
Yeah, so I've mentioned a lot today about tuning in, and so I think that's the simplest. It may not be the easiest place to start, but it's
Yeah,
a really simple place to start. What is my body telling me right now? And where can I soften? Because there's usually some part of our life where we're pushing too hard or overdoing it or putting too high of an expectation on yourself. What's one thing, which is one little thing I can change, whether it's saying
yeah,
I'm not going to get on social media in the morning or I'm going to set a boundary with this person or whatever, just little things. They don't have to be huge.
yeah. I think that's the really big thing, is that there are often some very grand sort of statements made. You've got to start taking this peptide, you have to start taking this supplement, you have to start, as we said, journaling for half an hour. It doesn't need to be that big. Yeah.
Exactly.
Amazing. Mandy, I end the podcast conversations with all my guests saying that this podcast is called The Things That I Want My Daughters to Know. And I always ask my guests, what do you want your daughters, whether, your biological daughters or your figurative daughters, your goddaughters, nieces, that next generation of women, what message do you want to share with them in relation to all the things that we've chatted about today?
Yeah, that they don't have to override their bodies to prove themselves. That, we can come from a place of empowerment that's balancing our hormones, that's, so that we don't have to have this bumpy, super bumpy ride into menopause.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
you're worthy just as you are. You don't have to hustle to prove your worth.
Yeah, you don't have to hustle to prove your worth. Yeah. And I think that as we've spoken so much about that nervous system regulation, it really begins so early on. If we're not paying attention to that stress piece really early on, it just gets bigger and bigger. Um, so I think, what you shared today is really powerful. I've loved everything that you've said. Where can people find you? Where are you hanging out on social media? Where can people follow you or learn more about your work?
Yeah, so I have a website which is Dr. Mandy Marzier. I'm sure you'll drop my links.
Yes,
.com. I'm also on Instagram at Dr. Mandy Marzier. I have Facebook accounts, and I'm on LinkedIn at Dr. Mandy Marzier also.
great, amazing. And you basically do one-to-one coaching work. That's where what you're doing. Amazing.
But this
And
year
do you
I will
do
be releasing some group programs, so get on my
yay?
list. Stay tuned.
Yay. Amazing. And you do remote work also, or it's only in location?
All of my work is remote now. Yeah, I've transitioned out of being the brick and mortar chiropractor and now
Yeah.
working on nervous systems virtually.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, everyone, go and check out Dr. Mandy's links. They're all in the show notes. Follow her. As you can hear, she knows what she's talking about, and everything that she said is so powerful. Not enough people are sharing her messages, and we need to get this message out really to change the whole conversation around women's health, perimenopause, menopause, understanding how and why we are experiencing what we're experiencing. So thank you so much for joining me. I really loved this conversation. And everyone listening, drop a review, please share, listen with your daughters, follow, subscribe, all those things that you do with podcasts. So to make sure that you don't miss an episode. And I look forward to seeing you at another episode of the Things I Want My Daughters to Know podcast.